as this morning, please do feel free to put some questions in on the chat function. And we'll also, after each of the 3 presentations have been completed, then have some time for questions and Q&A before we wrap up. So without further ado, I'll introduce then our first speaker for this afternoon, Andrew Gregory, who is a director at Cardiff Council. And Andrew's going to speak for about 20 minutes or so on the climate emergency and Cardiff's 10-year challenge. So thank you, Andrew, over to you.
Just to kick off then, I'll do a quick run through. It's great to be here. I'm the Director of Planning, Transport and Environment for Cardiff City Council. And also it's just been really enjoyable to hear the other comments that have been made today, really exciting stuff. I'm not going to dwell, most of my presentation is going to be bread and butter to you guys on the call. You're going to know a lot of it. What I'll do is I'll just pick out a few of the key issues which are that we're working through in terms of the detailed process now in Cardiff. So overall, 10-year challenge. We've got a target date which has been agreed at council the end of last year in terms of 10-year vision, both for the city and the council. Probably for the council, as we get into this, we might be able to kind of trim that target. But it's, as has been raised by others on the call, it's important to have a very clear target. The council's aim is, capital city of Wales, to have a very ambitious and defined work-through vision that leads to a programme of deliverability. I mean, the council is very much focused on delivery, and so the next stage is that currently we're working through the detail of the programme in terms of the different aspects, which I'll come on to in a second, in terms of retrofit and renewables and so on, the programme of actions. And we're going through the assessment process of those actions in terms of their carbon benefits. And then we're going to be taking this back to council, but first in March and then in June for a final sign off on the strategy, which will be our 10-year plan. But obviously a lot of that plan is the key elements of what happens in the next 2 years. It's basically getting the whole thing inflated and moving forward. Because one of the key things for the council is we don't want something which is just a glossy document. We want something that really transforms. And one of the interesting things for us is the more we go into this whole discussion, you realise actually it requires transformation, not just of a few projects, but of the council, of our partners, of how the city works as a whole. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So I'll run through these extremely quickly. We've called it a Cardiff One Planet strategy. It's based on a little bit about the carbon footprint, but effectively it's about kind of joining up our services around a single agenda. And, we're all aware of the critical issues here. Next step, please. Next slide, please. And, the opportunities are, one of the key things we want to sell out of this. And if you notice, the one at the top I've flagged up is about health resilience, because fundamentally what we're grappling with is this is all about resilience. We're in a health crisis at the moment, which is fundamentally we're here because we weren't resilient, both in terms of our health systems and strategies, but also the more fundamental issues that feed into it in terms of the social inequalities, environmental inequalities. A whole range of different resilience issues are becoming uppermost in the minds of governance in the UK, we hope, certainly in Cardiff Council. And so it's not just about carbon resilience. What we're looking at our One Planet strategy is very much a kind of wider piece in terms of how do we create a resilient city. And so then you've got the wider elements in terms of the environmental quality and so on. The other element of this that's picked out that was very much part of our COVID recovery plans is actually balancing that with the economic recovery, because it's not a luxury in terms of understanding what the economic benefits are. And really, we'll only win the argument when we actually have the carbon benefits playing into a longer term play in terms of economic regeneration as well. And as we know in Cardiff's case, and all cities virtually, you have different disparities of locational issues, impacts across the city, because we're not an equal city, we're a very divided city in certain respects, in terms of the environmental qualities and health qualities in between the different areas in the city, north and south of the city, should we say, in Cardiff. Next slide, please. The city's already been on this agenda for some time, so we've got, major steps have been made in terms of carbon reduction, retrofit of council housing, new build housing. Our estates teams very, very much on the game in terms of, moving to a low carbon model. We've got some actually quite successful renewables, new solar farm in Lambie Way, just going live. We've got Radawea, a small hydro scheme. And we're just starting to move forward on the EV programme. And we've got actually a very ambitious transport white paper 10-year plan, which is starting to bear fruit. This year, there's going to be a transformation in the city in terms of cycle network of segregated cycle routes, but also we've got a very ambitious plan in terms of tram and a whole range of, the transport infrastructure. But if I was to be frank about the level of the activity taking place and the need that's going to be identified, just in terms of retrofit, we've been averaging, 200 to 300 homes per annum, but actually we've got 150,000 homes in the city. 50,000 are probably substandard in terms of their environmental quality. So over a 10-year period, we can all do the maths, but we're just way off. And actually, we've been quite ambitious in terms of our retrofit. So we need to get into a different ballpark in terms of scaling up these projects and this activity. Next slide, please. And, no matter how ambitious we are, so for example, I've mentioned a few of those schemes, but, we've got a new heat network we're just mapping out, very complex, trying to get developers involved, connected into this system. Welsh Government and BEIS funding coming in, so very, very welcome on that. And also we've had very good, support from Welsh Government in terms of active travel and clean air proposals. But again, the question is this set of projects anywhere near what it needs to be to actually start making a difference? Next slide, please. So we've got our vision, which is 2030. And as I say, there could be some work on the council because probably we can move that quicker. Next slide, please. And you've got the familiar range. So we're trying to get a kind of full range of the issues to feed into the discussion. So we've got a very active discussion, and we had a food strategy signed off in the last year or so. And, within that, embedded within that, there's very ambitious plans in terms of food growing and schools food. Just to pull that up, we've got a very ambitious, Cardiff is a very water-based city in many respects, and we're trying to pull out those themes in terms of a wider strategy. So we've had, national attention applied to some of our retrofit flood and SUDS programs in inner city areas. Next slide, please. And it's recognizing the full range of the cross-cutting themes. So again, I've flagged up some of these and I'll come on to them a bit more, but I pick up particularly procurement as being an absolute sort of game changer, behavior change and collaboration, but they're all important. Next slide, please. I don't need to talk about this, but I think one of the items steps we're taking at the moment is to get some support in terms of understanding the carbon, the methodology for carbon assessment of the schemes, but also we're working with the health board in terms of trying to get some health metrics around the benefits of schemes. So we're trying to get this, in a way, understanding it in the broadest sense about the resilient benefits and to get a clear methodology to judge between the different schemes. Thank you. Next slide. So this is our broad list of the key projects moving forward, and I don't think there's any surprises there. They're ones that have been picked up by colleagues, and so it's around organisational and partnership embedding, large-scale new build, large-scale retrofit, development retrofit, and I tell you, there's a challenge in terms of estates, schools, housing. It's the existing stock, and the retrofit on that is absolutely huge for any local authority. It's billions and billions of pounds. So, and then new build, we have patterns of development which are very difficult to shift out, and we don't have the support from the building regs at the moment to require it. Then in terms of renewables, I've talked about that. Active travel, we've got a very, and the transport strategy, there's a considerable amount of work there. In terms of greening, we've got very exciting Coed Cardiff, like, turning the city Coed Forest Cardiff, moving forward, and we're looking at tree farming within the city. We've got ambitious recycling targets, which are Welsh government based, a food plan I've just mentioned, procurement, and the bottom element, which is about the rolling out of a citywide partnership, is absolutely crucial. And we're actively involved with our PSB, our partner, public sector partners, and the university and the health board. And really that's going to be a make or break. Can we get, as a group of organisations, a fully embedded green plan for the next 3 to 4 years? Okay, thank you. Next slide. We're almost at the end now. So if I was to pick up a few kind of key themes, first of all, okay, so Cardiff's aiming for this cost of programme, quantifiable, not just in carbon, but also in health. The key issue of embedding, and it's absolutely critical of this, but it's not just embedding in the organisations, I'd say it's also embedding in funding. And if there's one point I'd end up on this, is that we, Cardiff, and I think, Welsh Government and partners are leading to, we've got very strong, ambitious visions for, and they will be realistic, meaningful visions. But the element is funding is critical. And at the moment, there is not. This is the major problem. It's veneer funding. It's surface funding. So for example, on, retrofitted buildings, let's say at the moment we're at 200-300 a year, but we need to get up to thousands a year. And if you were to look at the region where you've got some of the most embedded poverty in the UK, we're going to be, up to, 100,000, hundreds of thousands of dwellings. So we are talking about, £10 billion programmes. Is that going to be picked up? Where is it going to be picked up? The type of funding that's being that we're talking about at the moment really doesn't tackle. So I would say local authorities are squeezed in a kind of, we're in the squeezed middle. We've got a vision, and we will have a vision, but who is going to come forward with funding that supports this? And we don't have the tax raising powers that some European cities have. So we really, there's a deficiency there. And until the point at which government takes this seriously enough to put the necessary funding into it, it will be to some extent a tokenistic approach, notwithstanding all the best efforts we can make and all the galvanization of our own communities, which we will be working on. At the end of the day, it's the funding for the heavy lifting in terms of infrastructure, which hasn't been invested in properly for the last 100 years. And that's maybe a particular UK problem, but probably it's a problem with cities across the piece. So thank you very much, Gill. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I think you certainly make a really important point, and very passionately, I think, about how we manage the to meet the scale of the challenge and the opportunities and the need with the resources and the political commitment that's available. So that's a very, very useful and important message, I think. So thank you very much.